Gurur Brahma, Gurur Vishnu, Gurur Devo Maheshwaraha, Gurureva Param Brahma, Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Chinmayam Vyapyat Sarvam Trailokyam Sacharacharam Tatpadam Darshitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Tvameva Mata Shapita Tvameva Bandhusha Sakha Tvameva Vidyat Ravinam Tvameva Sarvam Mama Deva Deva Tvameva Sarvam Mama Deva Deva. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahana Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. So where are we in our text?
Chapter 18, verse
48.
48. Okay. Atma bhasa parigyana dhyathatam yena vimohitaha aham kartaramatmeti manyante te niragamaha. Having no knowledge of the Vedas and deluded on account of the lack of the real knowledge of the self and its reflection, they consider the ego to be the self.
So again, we're talking about those of other schools, those still in the state of ignorance. So we think of the Vedas, especially the Jnana Kanda, the knowledge portion, the Upanishads, as a pramana. It's a valid means of knowledge. So people who do not know this are caught in this superimposition. I confuse ahankarta, word he used here. The individual doership, the superimposition that takes place in the subtle intellect, in the vijnana maya kosha, with the self. Of course, the root of it all is I think I'm the body. No blame. This is the way the Lord has projected or manifested the world. But also part of the Lord's projection is that in time, human beings develop the desire to know Mumukshata, and eventually come home to the infinite. The dream of this world ends. Next verse.
Sansaro vastu tesham kartritva lakshanaha atma bhasa shraya jnana sansarantya vivekataha. The transmigratory existence, consisting of agency and the experiencing of pain and pleasure, is, according to them, a reality. They, therefore, continue to be born again and again on account of the ignorance of the nature of the self, its reflection, and the intellect between which they cannot discriminate.
Yes. So what is it that gets born over and over again? It is the subtle body. In the subtle body, you have the 5 organs of action, the 5 organs of knowledge, you have the subtle form of the prana, you have the mind, you have the intellect, and you have ankriti, the ego sense, the karta, and the vasanas. Mind you, this is not the self. Every one of those elements is jada, is fundamentally insentient. But in that complex, because of its, for want of a better word, subtle hunger for experience, for the satisfaction of desire, it keeps going. Just like the physical body is struck with physical hunger. I must eat. What does that do? Keeps the body going. So the woman or the man of wisdom undoes the causative factor in the subtle body. What is the cause of that hunger for experience? The non-apprehension of my essential nature. I do not know that I am the space of consciousness. I do not know that happiness is my essential nature. And instead, I superimpose adhyasa. I think I'm the body, and I think happiness is out there. That keeps the whole zoo going. Next verse.
Chaitanya bhasita buddhi atmanastat svarupata syachetam jnana shabdescha vedah shastiti yuchyate. That the Vedas imply the self by means of words such as knowledge, etc., becomes reasonable if it is true that the self is of the nature of pure consciousness and the intellect that reflects it.
And the intellect what?
And the intellect reflects it.
Yes. So, what the Upanishads thunder is the doctrine of ajati. The self is never born. It's not that I have been a transmigrating soul and then through some process, I, the transmigrating soul, am now freed from this, that, and the other thing. No. Just like the dreamer who is caught in some problem, I'm kept in a box inside my dream. How do I get out of the box inside my dream? To the dreamer, it seems like I need to get out of the box. But then the alarm goes off and you wake up. What happened to the whole effort of the dreamer to get out of the box. Oh. So Vedanta is not a program of self-improvement. It's a program of self-abandonment, small self. Let go of that false self, that ch18, that reflected self, that pratibimba, like the image in a mirror. Ow. I'm very fond of shloka 267 in v48, where Shankara says, even after realization of the truth, meaning we've had maybe some experience in satsang, in our own meditation, the no-thingness of the self, there exists a strong, beginningless impression that one is the doer, the karta, which is the cause for rebirth. Here, rebirth means I re-identify. I call it the yo-yo state. Sometimes I know, sometimes I don't. Sometimes I know, sometimes I don't. Shankara used the metaphor of the tank in South India. You move the algae away to get the clear water, but ooh, the algae comes back. How do I remove it? Through steady and continuous identification of the self. If I feel like I'm a person, I'm deluded. Who is it who's upset? So, who am I? First, the discrimination, viveka. Then vairagya. Drop it. Then Shankara ends the verse. It is the annihilation of the vasanas here and now. Let's consider liberation. Over and over and over. So, practically speaking, what will happen? Our own vasanas, our own karma, will draw a situation to us where, first of all, I go into the state of spiritual sleep. I forget I am Brahman. And then the projection of the dream, I think I'm a person, and he did it to me, and she's not behaving right. I get triggered. And there's my chance to burn the vasana. Stop it. Remember who you are. And don't worry if you miss the opportunity, the Lord will bring it around again. Heard me say, who got upset this week? Tell me it's the first time you felt that. We keep burning up these attachments and identifications. It is the annihilation of the vasanas here and now. That's considered steady wisdom. Liberation. Next verse.
Two together.
Okay.
Prakriti pratyartho yo bhinna vekaschayo yatha karoti gacchati tyado drishto loka prasiddhitah nanyo vadyasya yatvam cha loke drishtam smrito tatha janatyartheshu ko hetu dyarsha yatve nigadyatam. Objection. It is well known among the people that the meaning of the root and that of the verbal suffix, though different from each other, in each of the words such as does, goes, etc., are seen to belong to the same subject. They are not seen to belong to two different subjects, either according to ordinary people or grammarians. Now please tell me the reason why the meanings of the root and the suffix should belong to two different subjects in the case of the words such as nose, etc.
So we're talking about my nose, my toes, my car, and me. So ahankarta, ahankriti, the sense of ego, is that different than aham, I? So when I refer to this karta, this agent in the equipment, I got up this morning, I took a shower, I made my bed, I did the dishes. Is that different than I am Brahman? Well, yes and no. For the ordinary person, I always refers to the agent. But Shankara is saying, well, actually, that agent is not really self. It's a function in the intellect. Let's see how he replies to the objection.
Atma bhasastu tingvacho dhatvarthascha dhiya kriya upayam cha vivekena janati tyuchyate mrisha. Reply. The meaning of the suffix is the reflection of the self in the intellect, and the root denotes an action, i.e., a modification of the intellect. As the intellect and the reflection are not discriminated from the self, the word knows is applied falsely to it.
So the idea here is knows, this is my nose, it belongs to me, is falsely applied to the self. In fact, the nose belongs to my body.
Jim, I think the word knows here, they're referring to like knows as a knowledge.
Oh! But it's the same.
Yeah.
Who is it who knows stuff? So the knowing happens in the intellect. We have two kinds of knowing. That was very funny. Two kinds of knowledge. We have the self-evidence of the self. How do you know you were you? You do not see, hear, taste, touch, smell, emote, or think yourself, yet you know you are. And I know how to speak English. I don't know how to speak French. I know where Whole Foods is. I don't know how to get to a particular store. That's a different kind of knowing. It's the knowing of stuff. That kind of knowing occurs in the intellect. Now, the knowing and the not knowing of the intellect is illumined by me. I am the substratum of that kind of knowing. Now, listen carefully. There is a knowing that happens in the subtle intellect. When the mind is in ignorance, my knowledge is I am me, Jim, the body. Ooh, the knowledge revealed in the scripture. My mind comes to know, oh, I'm not the body, I am Brahma. That's what we call pratyabhignana, recognition. And that doesn't touch the self either. This is why at the very end of Vivekachudamani, Shankar will say both bondage and liberation are illusions. Only I exists. The bondage isn't real, the liberation isn't real. Or we say the self is always liberated. It was never bound in the first place. Next verse. That was very funny.
Na buddhir vabodhosti natmano vidyate kriya ato nanyatarasyapi janatiti cha yujyate. The intellect has no consciousness and the self no action. The word knows can therefore reasonably be applied to neither of them.
So the knowing of stuff, the intellect is essentially inert. One thought can't know another thought. And the self has nothing in it. So we have this relationless relationship. Either we call it asparsha yoga. Asparsha means untouched. Yoga means joy. So when consciousness has the touch of the untouched with the subtle intellect, we get the knowing of stuff. Going on.
Napyato bhava shabdena gyaptirityapi yujyate na hyatma vishriyat matro nitya atmeti shasanat. The word knowledge in the sense of the action of knowing, cannot similarly be applied to the self. For the self is not a change only, which is indicated by an action as it is taught in the Shrutis, that it is eternal.
Yes. So when we think of knowledge, I didn't know something and now I know it, that's an action. That does not occur to the self. Listen very carefully. We get nothing new. The self-evidence of the self is an eternal reality. That's why the great 20th century Saint Meher Baba used to say, everybody's already realized. Even the most miserable of creatures does not doubt that they are. Do you exist? Yes. What's your existence? Misery. Do you know you're miserable? How do I know I'm miserable? I am, I shine. In truth, ignorance never really covers the self. It's only the mind that gets confused. And it is the mind that has this aha, this recognition. Now, why is this important? Well, it's in the mind that all my problems are. Self doesn't have any problems. So there's no agency, there's no acquisition of knowledge of the self. That's why the scriptures talk about the self is unknowable. Yet freedom comes from knowing the self. Well, make up your mind. How can it be unknowable and knowable? It is unknowable as an object. I will never be in meditation and go, oh, that's it, that's the self. What is it that's always there? What is it that's the eternal factor? The closest worldly experience I can think of. In the old-timey days back in the 70s, we used to have these things called samadhi tanks or sensory deprivation tanks. And they were filled with water that was at 98.6, and they were completely dark, and you'd get inside and it would deprive all your senses. And all of a sudden you could hear the thunder of your heartbeat. Lub, 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 dub, 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 lub, dub. We didn't create the sound of your heartbeat. What did we do? We removed everything that distracted my attention, that occluded the attentive faculty from noticing. It's always there. Your heart's beating right now. You'd be dead if it weren't. Likewise, yourself is eyeing all the time. We're always here. It's yourself. But in the mind exists this adhyasa, this superimposition. So just like in the sensory deprivation tank, we remove the distracting sensory experience in meditation. We remove not just our attention on the senses, but the thoughting itself. See what remains. Next verse.
Na yeshamek evatma nirdukho vitriya sada tesham syachabdha vachyatvam yeyatvam chatmana sada. The self is never knowable, and it is not directly denoted by any word according to those who hold that it is eternally changeless, free from pain, and one only.
So you will never know the self as an object. It is not knowable as phenomena yet. It is not known. People get all confused when they're looking for an experience of the self. We remove everything that's experiential. What's the remnant? What's the background? What's the leftover? What's the eternal factor? Next verse.
Yada hankarturat matvam tada shabdartha mukhyata nashanayadi matvatu shruto tasyatmateshyate. If the ego were the self, a word might be applied to it in its primary sense, but it is not the self according to the Shruti, as it is possessed of hunger, etc.
So, for the ego, we can say, I am hungry, I am happy, I am sad. We can apply descriptives, a word, to the ego sense. What we're actually describing is states of the body, states of the mind, states of the intellect. These descriptives do not denote the nature of the self. What about Satchidananda? These point, they do not define. Self is of Upadesham, Achintyam, Nirupam, without a form, unthinkable, and can't really talk. Speech falls short. Yet, it is always known. It is its own means of knowledge. Next verse.
There are 4 of them together.
Oh my golly gosh!
Hanta tarhina mukhyartho napi gauna kathanchana janati इत्यादिशब्दस्य गतिर्वाच्य तथापि तु शब्दानामर्थार्थत्वे वेदस्याप्रमाणता सा च निष्ठा ततो ग्राह्या गतिरस्य प्रसिद्धितः प्रसिद्धिर्मूढलोकस्य यदि ग्राह्या निरात्मता लोकायते कसिद्धान्तः सा चानिष्टा प्रसज्यते अभियुक्त प्रसिद्धिश्चे पूर्ववद्विवेकता गतिशून्यं न वेदोऽयं प्रमाणं संवदत्युत. Objection. Well, words that have no primary meanings can have no secondary ones also. Therefore, you are to explain the application of the words knows, etc. The Vedas would lose their authority as an evidence if words were false, which is not desirable. Reply. Should one therefore have to accept the application of words according to popular usage? Objection. If you accept the usage of ignorant people, you will have to arrive at the conclusion of the Charvakas, who hold that there is no self other than the body, but that is undesirable. If, on the other hand, you accept the usage of the learned, you will arrive at the same dilemma as before. The Vedas, which are in authority, do not use meaningless words.
So, again, my suggestion is don't get caught up in arguing points of grammar. So, are the Vedas a valid means of knowledge or not? They do use words. In Vivekachudamani, Shankara says, without knowledge of the self, study of the scripture is futile. Meaning you'll get all caught up in your own projections and conflicting commentaries, etc. Then he says, with knowledge of the self, study of the scriptures is again futile. You need not look to the Upanishads for knowledge. You are an Upanishad. So what is the purpose of the scripture? The scripture is a setu. It's a bridge. It becomes the vehicle for the guru to be able to show the shishya the awakened state of mind. That's their function. They are like a boat to take you across the ocean of samsara. But when you get to the farthest shore, you leave the boat. This is why Gita in the second chapter will say, he who knows, knows it not. people who argue points of non-dual philosophy on Facebook are simply sharing their stupidity and ignorance. She who knows it not knows. So I think of all those who would sit in the presence of Ramana Maharshi. So in the end, the deepest teaching is not done with words. It's done in emptiness. But the scriptures lead us there. They are a Brahman. They are a means of knowledge, not the knowledge itself. They're a vehicle, they're a tool. Next verse.
Yatra yasyava bhasastu tayoreva vikvekataha janati ti shriyam sarvo loko bhakti swabhavataha. Oops, I missed the first. There were two verses together. I'll go back and read the first one. Adarshe mukha samanyam mukhasye shtam hi manaveha mukhasya pratibimbo hi mukhakarena drishyate. So reply. As the reflection appears like the face, people accept its oneness with its reflection in a mirror. All people therefore naturally use the verb knows, etc., owing to the indiscrimination between that in which there is no reflection. Owing to the indiscrimination between that in which there is the reflection and that which is reflected.
So the person goes into the bathroom and looks into the mirror and says, "Oh, I'm getting bags under my eyes now. Oh dear." How do you know? Oh, I looked into the mirror this morning. Now is the pratibimba, the reflection in the mirror, the same as my mukha, face? No. They are different. But I attribute to my face the qualities that I see in the reflection. Let me give you an example. If you go to a really fancy restaurant and you go into the bathroom, the mirrors are tinted slightly and the lighting is indirect. Pretty good tonight. Then if you go into Target or Ross, an inexpensive department store, and you're trying on a pair of trousers, and you go into the fitting room and there's fluorescent lights up above and a cheap mirror, you look in and not only, you see every wrinkle and blood vessel and pimple and redness. Have you ever had that experience? What's the difference? The reflecting surface. So what do? I attribute to my face the properties of the reflecting surface. That's what happens in the mind. I attribute to myself the qualities of the changing intellect. I am hungry. I am fat. I am young. I am old. I was angry. I was peaceful. I am talented. Oh, I'm such a loser. All properties of the tinted mirror of the body, mind, intellect. Now, if I get a mirror that's absolutely perfectly ground, like they do for the Hubble Space Telescope or something, I will see the most accurate reflection of my face. So what is the perfect reflecting surface of the intellect? Shunya, empty. Mauna, sigh. And the mind is like a clear mirror. And in the subtle intellect, I see I'm not a person. Aham Brahmasmi. Brahman. Chidananda Rupaha. I'm a form of this consciousness. Shivo. Next verse.
Buddhe kartritva madhyasya janatiti uchyate tatha chaitanya madhyasya gyatvam buddhera rihochyate. The self is said to be knowing things on account of the superimposition of the agency of the intellect on it. Similarly, the intellect is called a knower owing to the superimposition of consciousness on it.
So again, Shankara is riffing on this relationless relationship. The self seems to be Sakshi, the ever-present eternal witness of everything. When peeping through the intellect, the world of name and form is manifested. I know things perceived through the senses, I know feelings, I know thoughts. And it seems to be a limited knower. Stop the mind, meaning stop the flow of thoughts, even for a moment. And that false self, that manufactured self, you could say ahankriti, ahankarta, ahankara, is a manufactured, it's a made I. Oh. Next verse.
Swarupam chatmano jnanam nityam jyoti shruteya shruteryataha na buddhatya shriyate tasman natmanyanena vasada. Eternal knowledge, which is the nature of the self described by the Shrutis as the light of consciousness, is never created by the intellect, by itself, or by anything else.
Yes. Nityam Jyoti. Literally, eternally lighted, eternally shining. So I do not have states of consciousness in the end. I have states of mind. You are consciousness itself. Nityam Jyoti. Eternally shining. And that self even illumines ignorance. So you can have knowledge of the presence of something and knowledge of the absence of something. Do you know there's a phone in my hand? Yes. Do you know there's no phone in my hand? Yes. Here in class, when your mind is tuned up, do you know your self-nature? Yeah, I get it, Jim. And then you have a fight with somebody at the supermarket. economy goes haywire, you're fearful about your portfolio, and all of a sudden that false self, fake self, that shadow self seems so real. Oh, Jim, I got so identified and triggered this week. Will it ever stop? Did you know that you were identified and triggered? You did not lose yourself. You just had a stupid mind state. Oh, the stupid mind state. Oh. Did it pass? All mind states pass. All right, next one.
Dehe ham pratyayo yadvad janatiti cha laukikaha vadanti jnanakartritvam tadvad buddhestatmanaha. Just as people regard their bodies as themselves and say that they, bodies, know things, so they speak of the intellect having the agency in producing knowledge, and of the self as being its seat.
So in our ordinary vyavahara transactions, I know what the sensation of the leather on my hand feels like. I know what it feels like because my pants are too tight after Thanksgiving. So I attribute to the self the sensations of the body. Likewise, I know what I've studied in the Upanishads. I must have knowledge now. It's what we call paroksha jnana. In drop all the knowledge of things. Next verse.
Bodhehastu pratyayerevam kriyamanesha chinnibheha mohita kriyate jnana mityahustarkika janaha. Deluded by the modifications of the intellect which appear to be conscious and are created, the argumentative philosophers say that knowledge is produced.
So these are those who confuse the knowledge of understanding, having read the scriptures with the direct experience. That is a kind of knowledge, the indirect knowledge gained from the teacher, gained from the scriptures. But each one of us must directly experience it. Now, if you're tuned to the teacher, when we break open the scriptures, your understanding and experience can come together at the same time. That's ideally what's supposed to happen. But that's different than hanging out with someone at a dinner party who says, well, Ramakrishna says this, and Ramana Maharshi says that, and the Sargadatta Maharaj says that, and then I was watching a Sadhguru YouTube video, and blah, 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 blah. And they can parrot all these understandings. And that's a little material satisfaction for this guy. It's not the same. It can be helpful. The scriptures always imply practice. Okay, I think we'll quit here. What number are we on for next week?
69.
69. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Shri Guru Pyo Namaha. Hari Om.